All right, it looks like we have folks trickling in here. So let's go ahead and get started so that we are respectful of everyone's time. So thank you to everyone for joining us today. As most of you probably know, 2022 was a really big year for the charter schools program and for the entire charter school community. Earlier this year, the Department of Education proposed new rules for the program, which the community came together to fight. The department also ran major competitions under the CSP for the first time in 2 years. Today, we're going to share an update on the new CSP rules and the 2022 competitions. Then we're going to spend the bulk of our time speaking with two really inspiring school leaders whose schools have received funding from the CSP. But before we get started, just a little bit of housekeeping. Today's webinar will be recorded and a link will be available on our website in the next few days. All participants are currently muted, but we still want you to engage with us. So for those of you who are joining us on Zoom, you'll notice down at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A icon. So if you have a question during the webinar, you can just type your question right there and our team will put those questions to our presenters during the final part of our webinar. So let me start by introducing the members of our panel today. First, we have Yetta Lewis. She is CEO and co-founder of the Gestalt Community Schools in Memphis, Tennessee.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, thanks, Yetta. Then we have Amber Leon Guerrero. She is the Chief Student Success Officer at Dreamhouse Eva Beach in Kapolei, Hawaii.
Hello, everyone.
Next, we have Christy Wolf. She's Senior Vice President of Policy Research and Planning at the National Alliance. Hi, Christy. And I'm Fiona Sheridan McIver. I'm a former teacher at both district and charter schools, and I'm now a member of the policy team here at the National Alliance. So we're going to start today by talking about these new rules for the charter schools program. As many of you probably know, this past spring, the Department of Education proposed new rules and regulations for the charter schools program. These rules were proposed without stakeholder input and contained some seriously concerning elements. So these included a community impact analysis that would prioritize diverse by design schools over culturally affirming schools, or over schools that are designed to serve historically marginalized communities that are often racially isolated. They also included a priority for collaboration between district and charter schools that could pretty much effectively give districts veto power if they refuse to collaborate. And they also included some pretty significant reporting requirements about contracts with for-profit contractors that might disproportionately burden mom and pop school leaders, leaders of color, and rural leaders who might have less institutional capacity. And these were just a few among many other proposed requirements. So the National Alliance worked with the charter school community to mount a pretty significant response to these proposed rules. We launched a call to action, and across the comment period, there were more than 25,000 total comments that were submitted. And of those 25,000, at least 10,000 of those came through our National Alliance call to action portal. So thank you to anyone on this webinar right now who submitted comments, because they really made a difference in the final outcome. The rules also got a ton of press coverage, and there was a pretty significant response from elected officials, including letters from governors and members of Congress. And the final rules were issued in July, and thanks to your advocacy, there were some meaningful changes from the initially proposed rules. But that said, we still oppose these rules, and we don't feel that they were put in place to support high-quality charter schools. Now, under these rules, the department ran the first major CSP competitions in 2 years. Patty, if we could just move to the next slide. Thank you so much. During this application cycle, there were 25 entities that received more than $221 million in new awards over the next 3 to 5 years. So first off, we have the state entity program, which is here on the left. That's the largest program within the CSP. It provides funding to state education agencies and other statewide nonprofit organizations, which could then make subgrants to schools in their states. Despite having a significantly shortened application window due to what happened with the rules this year, 6 state entities successfully mounted applications, and those are Connecticut, Georgia, Illinois, Massachusetts, Mississippi, and Tennessee. And it's important to note that 4 of these grantees are actually charter support organizations, or CSOs. So those are the Northeast Charter Schools Network, which ran for Connecticut, the State Charter Schools Foundation of Georgia, the Illinois Network of Charter Schools, and Mississippi First. Additionally, 6 individual schools received charter school developer grants, which provide funding directly to schools in states that don't have any current funding through the state entity program. And then Patty, next slide, please. Thank you. And 6 organizations, including the National Alliance, received national dissemination grants, which support the sharing of best practices to strengthen the charter school community. And finally, 7 financial organizations received credit enhancement for charter school facilities grants, and those help charter schools access affordable school buildings. So Patty, next slide, thank you. So as you can see here, CSP has a pretty broad reach as of 2022. 32 states across the country have active state entity grants. 9 states, and that's including Puerto Rico, have only developer grants. So that means they don't have any state entity funding, and schools have applied directly to the federal government for funding. And then 9 states have both state entity and developer grants. And this is possible only in states where someone applied and received a developer grant before the state received its state entity funding. And then finally, 7 states have no funding right now, even though they have charter school laws. And Patty, next slide. Last thing to highlight is that the competition window is currently open for replication and expansion for CMOs. So we urge any CMO leaders on this call who are considering expanding to apply for funding before the January 3rd deadline. And there's some links in this presentation here, and I will also drop those in the chat in just a second. And you are still eligible to apply even if you have not submitted a notice of intent to apply. The notice of intent is something that's nice to do, but it's not required. So even if you haven't done that, you can still consider applying before the January 3rd deadline. And now with that quick summary of what happened so far in 2022, I'm going to turn it over to Christy Wolf, and she's going to give us an update on what we saw with these new CSP rules in 2022.
Excuse me. Thanks, Fiona. So Fiona's brought us up to date with respect to what happened for fiscal year 22 and the money that went out the door under the state entity and the developer programs. And what we did as a team as soon as the applications that were available was to look closely to see what was proposed in response to the new rules, to see if we could kind of tease out the rules' initial impact, particularly on the state entity competitions applicants and what they propose to do in their states. And the bottom line is that nothing that we saw so far ameliorated our concerns or really gave us a good sense of necessarily how things are going to play out in the state entity program in particular, because many of the requirements apply to how the state will give money out to its subgrantees. So what the applicants are doing in their application is describing a process that they will use, and on the basis of that process, they get the funds, and then they implement the process to award the subgrantees to charter schools that want to open or replicate and expand. So one of the major concerns that we had, or several of the major concerns that we had with the final rule, despite the significant changes that the department made to improve the rule, have to do with the requirements that the states use to award those subgrants. So even though we can see how the state responded in their applications, we don't really know whether it's going to impact funding New Start schools and replications until the money goes out. So for example, the community needs analysis. While the department in its final rule removed some of the more onerous requirements that related to, for example, demonstrating that there were too many students and so that the charter schools were taking surplus students, or some of the more onerous analytical requirements, the analysis is still required. It's not necessarily required for the state to use that as a point basis to award funds, but if a state was so inclined, they could really use that to gatekeep who is funded and who is not. So we were going to be looking closely to see what the impact is of the community needs analysis when the states start awarding funds. There's obviously some overlap, or maybe it's not obvious, but good authorizing and good subgrant awards currently under the CSP, of course, are looking at the degree that such a charter school program is needed. Ideally, authorizing and what an applicant has to do to get a CSP grant are virtually the same thing, so that you're not putting more onerous requirements on a school that has already been awarded a charter. But what we did see in some of the applicants is that they're going to have to change the process or add a bit more than what they currently do under authorizing. This also applies to the requirements in the rule related to applicants needing to demonstrate their impact on the surrounding diversity of schools and whether or not they will be recruiting or enrolling a student population that looks like the surrounding geographic area, and our concerns with its impact or potential chilling effect on schools applying for grants from urban areas, in racially isolated areas, or for schools that want to offer a culturally affirming curriculum that by definition are not necessarily marketing themselves to every student group within a school district. So it is still early to see. It still remains to be seen how that will impact them. All of these requirements that I've described that won't really play out until the state awards the funds will directly play out in the context of the CMO competition. So the CMO applications that are due January 3rd, they have to show how all of these requirements have been met in order to get funded. They're going to have to demonstrate they're going to have to address school diversity, enrollment, community needs for each of the charters they propose to open. So once those applications are in and awarded in the spring, we'll be able to have a clear line of sight into potentially the rules impact. But that's all, that none of that changes our overall sense that these rules are not a help or an accelerant for providing high quality schooling environments for the kids that need them most. They're burdens and potential burdens and speed bumps that could potentially slow things down or just have applicants deciding to make other plans and not get these funds or not open at all. At the end of this webinar, we'll talk about what you all can do as next steps, but at least in terms of policy, these regulations are final. The department is using them. They can make slight modifications or choose not to use certain portions of them in future competitions. But there's really, in terms of the existence of these rules and their continued legal viability, Congress can repeal them through the Congressional Review Act, and there is a movement to do that, at least within the Senate, but we do not see that actually at the end of the day being successful. We think that even if it were to somehow pass in the House before the timeline is up, I think by the end of the year, the president would veto it. So while there may be some messaging around that, and we're hearing that there could be a vote to repeal the rules next week, even in the Senate, we don't necessarily see that at the end of the day having an impact. There also are ways to address certain requirements, especially if they prove to be a deterrence to applicants or interfering with charter schools getting grants through the appropriations process. But that's a little early to say how or whether that is a viable solution as well. But happy to try to answer questions about that during Q&A. So I will stop there and turn it back to Fiona. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christy, for that update. And just as a reminder to everyone listening, you can put questions in the Q&A box down at the bottom. We've seen a couple ones come in already, and we will be posting them to our panel at the end of our webinar today. And those can be questions that are for our school leaders, or they could be questions for Christy about the rules. So feel free to keep putting those in as we continue talking. So now we're going to shift gears and we're going to hear from the people who are actually putting these CSP dollars to work every day serving their communities. So we're joined today by two truly inspiring and school leaders to share their stories of how CSP funds have helped them serve their communities. So I want to thank you both for joining us today and sharing your time and stories. So first we have Yetta Lewis. I mentioned before, she's CEO and co-founder of Gestalt Community Schools in Memphis, Tennessee. As a little bit of background, Gestalt received support from the Credit Enhancement Program within the CSP, which is designed to help charter schools address the cost of facilities. And it does this by funding eligible entities that in turn enhance the credit of charter schools so they can access private and non-federal capital to finance facilities projects and pay affordable interest rates. So basically makes funding affordable for schools to access. And a total of $1.75 million in CSP funds helped Gestalt access school buildings as the network grew. And it also supported some other projects that we're going to have the opportunity to hear about. And second, we have Amber Leon Guerrero. She's the Chief Student Success Officer at Dreamhouse Eva Beach in Kapolei, Hawaii. Dreamhouse received an initial CSP developer grant to support the launch of the school back in 2018 and received a second $1 million CSP developer grant for the replication and expansion of high quality charter schools in 2020. And that one was to expand the school. And I want to especially thank Amber for joining us across the time zones from Hawaii. We know it's early there and we appreciate having you on today. So Yetta and Amber, I'd like to start by giving each of you the opportunity to just tell the 2 to 3 minute story of your school. How did you come to found or lead your school? What community does it serve? Why is your school different than other public school options in the area? And really just what makes your school special? So let's go ahead and start with Yetta. I see you're unmuted there.
Good. So Gestalt Community Schools started in 2008. We opened to middle school, 6th grade, 125 sixth graders. And we are in the heart of Memphis, Tennessee. And the community that we served and started in is a community called Hickory Hill Community. In 2008, we opened school in the heart of a national recession. And in the state of Tennessee, that particular zip code had the highest rate of home foreclosures. And the local businesses were moving out. So it was really a rough time to open a school. But part of our work as Gestalt, the name really says that we are organized whole, but that some of its parts are perceived as more. So for us, school and community are equal. Things that happen in the community impact school, and school also impacts community. And we hope in our part that it elevates it. So our schools really focus on financial literacy. They focus on entrepreneurship and business, technology, and community service. And at the anchor of all of our schools, we're anchored around a community revitalization effort. So with every school, we're built around really uplifting the legacy of the community. We use a community design process to design elements of the school that are unique to the community. So our schools are not named Gestalt Community Schools. They're named after communities. So Power Center Academy, the power source, is the name of an element in the community that holds true as a legacy in the community. So we hope to produce students that are citizens that will solve for problems in their community and also are able to kind of give back through not only community service, but through business, technology, entrepreneurship, critical thinking. So we started in 2008 with 128 students. We're now serving over 2,700 families in that community.
I was on mute there. Thank you so much for sharing that, Yetta. And Amber, could you do the same thing? Just share like 2 to 3 minutes. Tell us the story of your school.
Yeah, thank you also, Yetta, for sharing. Hi, everybody. I'm Amber. I'm the Chief Student Success Officer here at Dreamhouse Eva Beach Public Charter School. Our school opened up in 2019 at Laulani Shopping Center. So it was a shopping center where, we had to tell our families like this was it. This is where we got to start. And it was in the heart of Eva Beach. And so from there, our community serves, I would say, over 40 neighborhood schools within the area. And so you're looking at a lot of our, families now that are just really was looking for something different, a totally complete educational model, which is why Dreamhouse Eva Beach focuses on identity and leadership development. And so what makes us very special and unique is one, we always put people first before paper. And what that looks like is we have, a lot of our instructional leaders will always build the relationships first before diving into designing their curriculum. And so that's how we become like very culturally responsive. And where a lot of our students really go back to who they are, as a leader, because that's what we focus on. And so from here, you're looking at us expanding every single year, and knowing that we just started off with 6th grade, 100 students. We ended up moving to another location, which is in the Kapolei area in Kalailoa, which currently house our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, which is 300. And then now where we're currently at is another marketplace center with our founding class that started off at Laulani Village. So there's actually really used to, having to kind of move locations. And so that's where we're at. And so, in our high school model, it's completely open. You're looking at 100 students that are all inclusive and all in one big hall. And so from here, focusing on our LEAD model, which is really embedded in the practice and in the nature and the identity of the school. And when we focus on the social emotional learning piece of it, we've recognized that a lot of our student leaders are really just owning who they are. And that's what we need. And that's why we've been focusing on how do we get our, homegrown leaders to give back to our community? How do we get them to lead our community? How do we get them to advocate on behalf of what it is our community needs? And that truly makes us special because we're able to provide them access and the foundational skills to go out to the community, to talk to stakeholders, to talk to community leaders, and get that real life experience.
Thank you, Amber. Now, I think both of you touched on this in your introductions, but there's been a lot of talk in recent years about how important it is for parents and community to have a voice in their schools. And I'm wondering if you could each tell us a little bit about how your schools involved parents and community members when you were in the design process of creating the school, and then how they continue to have a voice in ongoing operations. So if we could start with Yetta.
Yeah, so that's very critical. Parent and community voice are critical in our design element. We say now that we're at a place where probably, 60% of our design is something that's scalable and reparable, but 40% is really designed with the family's voices. So we actually have community planning meetings. They're hosted before we even open a school. To look at not only the physical design of our schools, but programming. And that has led to designs that our original schools with business and entrepreneurship, our newer schools have shifted because of parent voice around STEM and leadership development. And that came from our parents. So both brick and mortar ideas and what they want in their community school, but also the programming. But it doesn't stop there. Every school has what we call a parent advisory council. So before the school opens, we are engaging families, parent partners, community members on what is the design elements of the school that makes sense for the community that we're serving. But then once schools are started, the Parent Advisory Council, which we call a PAC, includes parent leaders that meet each month. They host meetings for other parents. They meet with school leadership to elevate whatever challenges that are there, whatever support they can give at the school. They also bring community partners in. So last night we just had a PAC council meeting at our high school where parents were going through financial literacy workshops. And another school had a PAC meeting where they were going over student data, but it's led by parents. And we partner with organizations to teach our parents how to better advocate for their students. So in Memphis, Stand for Children is one of our partners that help to provide parent support and training. And so we have PAC members. Any parent can, as soon as you enroll, you become a PAC member. But we also have a designee of PAC leaders. These are parents that are trained to learn how to advocate and support and train other parents.
Thank you for sharing that. Yetta, can I ask a follow-up question? I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about the genesis of the PACs that you have. And I understand that they're parent-led now, but how did you get to the point of having parent-led groups like that?
So we actually started with the traditional PTA group that one of our founding parents started, and we realized we wanted to do a non-membership, non-financial type of unique type of group that would kind of be able to provide voice and support, direct contact and support for parents. And parents didn't want officers. So they came to our first school and said, you know, we want to kind of start our own parent group. But we want to also address some community issues. There was a traffic issue going on in the community that was the first thing that they tackled, and safety and traffic. And then they pushed very hard on school leadership to change things from disciplinary practices to what type of wraparound services we can provide to families. And that was all parent voice saying, we want to do it differently than a traditional PTA.
Thank you, Yetta. All right, Amber, can we come over to you? I heard you mention when you gave your introduction to your school, this empowering homegrown leaders idea. So I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit about what that looks like in your school and how that reflects the needs of the community and how that involves the community.
Yeah, you know, when it comes to instructional design, and of course our leadership engagement agency and development model, you know, what we do is we really allow our students to actually go out in the community. And so one of my favorite projects that we did, especially during COVID, was we actually took a bike tour around our community just to actually see and to feel, you know, what the effects of COVID. And so to us, you know, we really harp on a lot of experiential and place-based learning, so that way we can expand what classroom and learning looks like beyond just the four walls that our students are definitely used to. And so when we allow them to go into communities, we allow them to, you know, talk to community members just to get that, you know, one-to-one experience of what it's like to just public speak and to share who we are. And also to ask questions, you know, really dive deep into what is it that, you know, businesses are struggling with, and how can we, knowing that this is our community, to gather and, you know, come up with solutions on how to support each other. And so from there, you know, I'd say we've just been successful in a lot of organizing a lot of drives for any community needs. A lot of our students go out there and do a lot of community service. And when they get these foundational experiences, what we've learned that it just brings a lot more meaning to the classroom. And a lot of them are just definitely stepping up now, are just talking to legislators and asking them questions and really just diving deep about, you know, what are we doing to focus to move poverty forward, or to, you know, decrease the rates of poverty here in our community. And so, you know, it takes a lot of involvement. A lot of our parent leaders are definitely in community and leadership positions, which is why we lean on their strengths. We bring them in to share what their organizations are doing, share what their mission and vision, and also thought partner with students on how to continue to make communities thrive.
Thanks, Amber. I agree that experiential learning is so important for kids. I love that you guys are doing that. Yet I have one more question for you on this topic. So I understand that Gestalt also has a parent academy for new families. Could you tell us a little bit about what that is and how it makes a difference for the success of the children at your schools?
Yeah, you know, the Parent Academy started as parent orientation, or orienting many families that had no exposure to charter, to our charter environment. But it has grown into a Parent Academy, which is not just a summer orientation for new parents, but each year there are a collection of classes and experiences that families have together. So we just did a equine therapy, where there was a class where parents did horseback riding with their students in a therapeutic setting. We've done everything from financial literacy to healthy cooking to, in our community, from a student service learning project, diabetes is a rampant disease within our community. So we just did healthy cooking classes. So it has gone from us leading them around academic success and unpacking student data to like, what's happening in your home and how can we create no longer wraparound services, but infrastructure, information to families, resources that are in the schools. So we open our schools up to partners that come in and deliver the academy classes for families. And each school has a collection of community partners that free of service, delivered awareness as well as resources to families. And that became very important during the pandemic. So it enabled us to start a mobile food pantry so that we could deliver food safely to parents. It also enabled us to deal with some mental health and physical health issues with our local health clinics and mobile immunization. And all of that is a part of Parent Academy. And the great thing is we're no longer leading them. Parents are bringing partners to us and saying, hey, we want them in the schools. And so we provide the venue, the actual physical structure where people can meet, and a communication link to communicate and market these sessions and Parent Academy sessions for our families. And we've opened it up to the larger community as well.
I think that's the most inspiring part to me, is how much this is driven by your parents at this point. I think that just really demonstrates like how well established your school is in the community and how much the parents are driving it in these days. So thank you for sharing that. Now I'd like to shift over to talk a little bit about CSP funding. So I'd like to hear from each of you how you found out about CSP funding and what did the CSP make possible in your schools that you wouldn't have been able to accomplish without the CSP. So this time, let's start with Amber.
Yeah, I think for us, it was the charter's founders applied for this grant in 2008. And having heard about it from fellow charter schools who just really had applied, receiving the grant was really the catalyst that changed everything for Dreamhouse. I think it signaled to all stakeholders, to donors, to families and community leaders that Dreamhouse was here to stay. And, I think for really the first time, we had a significant startup funds to help us, one, commit to staff and family recruitment, and also program development, facilities, and really just building a momentum towards launching Dreamhouse.
Thanks, Amber. Yenna, what about you?
So I think the biggest, there are a couple of big opportunities that was the tipping point that CSP provided for Gestalt. One was just sheerly the growth. We were in a partnership with a local church, and we were in their Sunday school, and we could only have about 350 students. So with that first move, we were able to build out a building that houses close to 500 students. And we were able to build out a building and secure property to also partner with other organizations such as Habitat for Humanity to build out homes for our families, first-time homeowners. So in our schools, we're trying to really pick up the legacy within the community and offer services that are wraparound. So that Habitat homes around our schools really makes for a walkable community for our students. The first property that we were able to secure was a blighted property of over 30 acres, and it became a dumping ground for trash in the community, and crime rate in that area became very high with vacant properties. So we were able to secure that property in conjunction with Habitat for Humanity and a local community development corporation to build out our first school. And so every time we build out, we look for opportunities to build in collaboration. Not only is it cost savings, but it's also giving necessary services for our families. And then I think with that investment from CSP, we were able to grow from 1 to 5 schools, but we were also able to leverage those dollars so that others could invest in us. For example, we were able to get a multi-million-dollar grant from FEMA and TEMA, where we were in the heart of a tornado, and we were able to get a storm shelter grant from FEMA. And the storm shelter is for the community. If any emergency happens, there's a storm shelter there. But when it's not a storm shelter for the community, it is our auditorium, or in another case, a gymnasium for school. So instead of that being a part of the larger extreme facilities costs, we're able to leverage those dollars to build out a more comprehensive program for our K through 12 schools.
Thank you for sharing that, Yetta. And I think we need to get you out there teaching other school leaders how to leverage all these different funds. Because when I've heard about that the first time, I was just so inspired that you were able to connect so many different funding sources to do really meaningful things in your community. And I think it just demonstrates how school is more than just school. It's a community for everyone. And this is a question again for both of you guys. So how did receiving the CSP funding impact the trajectory of the school and your work in the communities you serve? Amber?
It just allowed us to focus, right? Just using our startup funds, and really just also allowed us to stop focusing solely on like the fundraising and more on the program and the recruitment, and also developing our school model. You know, I think Dreamhouse Eva Beach Public Charter School is one of the newest charter schools that just opened up in 2019. And so again, you know, as we continue to grow and grow, we just found that how the CSP really allowed us to just focus on other things other than just the funding portion and the facilities of our school. And then it also allowed us to like signal to funders that we are legitimate and we're also just ready to launch. I think those are just also, you know, validation from other organizations that want to invest, also want to see who else is out there funding your charter school. And then it was just really about the resources, right? Buying all the necessary materials for kids, for families, for staff. That really just helped us a lot.
Thanks. And yeah, I think you touched on this a little bit, but is there anything you wanted to add on this part?
No, I think she said it well. It's about sustainability and scalability for us. So we were able to really develop strong programming that could scale and that is sustainable. And it actually created a larger footprint within our community for our schools.
Thanks for sharing that. Just a reminder to everyone who's listening right now, you can put questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen right now. And those can be questions for either of our school leaders, or they can be for Christy about the rules. I have one more big topic I'd like to talk about, which I think is everyone's favorite subject, the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'm hoping that each of you can tell us a little bit about what school looked like for you during the first few years of the pandemic, and how did the flexibility of the charter school model impact how your school responded to the pandemic? So this time, let's start with Yetta.
Yep, I think for us, so what a central part of our program is that every person is known, loved, and educated, and we're unapologetic. It's in that order. You have to know your community, you have to love the people you serve, and then there's able to be some awareness and education. So it was a struggle. It was a struggle, but because we had such good community partners and parents that could verbalize, hey, we're struggling at home. We cannot educate our students in the same way online. We switched from online to hybrid to eventually getting more families to trust us and to get us back in school. But we became a hub for the community. We worked with local neighborhood churches to create learning pods that were safe. We created smaller learning pods in our school, and we just became very resilient. But that focus around knowing and loving folks really produced a different way in how we focus around social and emotional learning. We did a lot of online therapy, a lot of therapeutic services for families as well as our staff. So we elevated the work around supporting our staff physically and mentally as well, their mental and physical well-being. And it was very critical, but I think one of the best opportunities that came out of the pandemic, because there was a lot of struggle, but it had us thinking differently around our model and who we serve and how we can serve them and get there. And in fact, we created a lot of teacher-focused groups to rebuild our math program, to rebuild the service learning programs that our students do and how they do address concerns and needs in the community. So from all the hardship, there was tremendous opportunity, but we're still rebuilding.
Thanks, Yetta. Amber, same question for you. What did school look like for you during the pandemic, and how did being a charter school impact how you responded?
Wow. I mean, just going back, I remember it just being very quiet. I felt our school it just didn't feel alive. And so I think for all of us as adults that were, just serving our learners inside our homes, just knowing that the struggles that all of us were just experiencing, we really had to just sit down and focus on what is really the true need and take a pause on also academics. Academics couldn't come first because we knew that we were entering an environment where children were not used to learning from home. Children were not used to having so much distractions, and we had to learn. And those were so much growing pains that parents, students, and us as the designers, for our learners, just really had to sit in that discomfort and really just pushed ourselves to reimagine what education could be, which allowed us and also staff members that felt comfortable with actually bringing students back on campus. And when we did it, we really had to be very intentional about how, what are we going to focus on? We did a lot of design thinking and prototypes and just really expanding life beyond the four walls again. We had to just continue to go out to the community, really feel the impact of what COVID's effect have been doing to us. And then again, just allowed us to focus more on community needs, such as doing a lot of food drives. Our school was known for that, as well as partnering with the hospitals that wanted to offer vaccinations or COVID testing for the community. And then, of course, when it came back, into school, we partnered with parents and also students to get their input on whether or not they would feel comfortable coming back into the spaces and what we needed to think about. Because as designers, right, a lot of us can just really focus on certain areas, but when we have all the stakeholders involved, they allow us to see our blind spots and things that we didn't think about. And so one of the things that we've done during the pandemic, when we were allowed to bring students back into schools, was to have, of course, like Ohana bubbles. And Ohana bubbles meant that kids had to be in pods and follow each other, because our school motto for middle school, they have about 5 classes and they're rotating all the time. And so, just in case we had a COVID case, we had to make sure we knew who was surrounded. So that took a lot of hard work, I like to call it. But again, at the end of the day, we still pushed on, and we recognized that a lot, all of our learners just loved being surrounded by their peers, and of course, being at school. And so how do we continue to foster and rebuild and rekindle our relationship, just knowing that, hey, we're still in a pandemic, right? COVID's not gone yet. And I think that's a lot of us are in recovery. And I think that's what we're feeling right now, the recovery of and the symptoms of COVID, and also just taking care of the adults in our schools that continue to show up every single day, regardless of how tired they are, and and also our parents who truly believe in all of us. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, and I have to say, I'm a former educator. I have to say thank you to all of the educators who are presenting right now, who are listening in right now. I know the incredible work that has been happening right now, and we all value and appreciate it so much, even if doesn't always feel like it's being valued. I have one more question about COVID before we open it up to the audience for Q&A, which is, and I think you both touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to hear from each of you, what do you think are the top maybe 2 things that you learned or new practices you started doing during COVID that you think we should carry forward into education, that we shouldn't lose once we're back into normal education? And maybe we'll start with Yetta.
Yeah, so the narrow it down to 2, we learned so much, but I will say the pulse check on your people. it was easy when everyone was right in the same building. We pride ourselves in knowing the people that we work with and we serve. But this pulse check remotely actually had us getting to staff members and families that may fall through the cracks. They look okay, they say they're okay, but they're not. And so now we are more systematic around how we check on our folks, right? Are you okay? And then even if there isn't a full transparency, we have just different ways to check on individuals. I think the second part of that work was that this work that we're doing around well-being is a catalyst for the work that we're doing for academic success. And we realized when we dismantled our community, and it was such a disruption, that the tenements that we have around community, both student voice and parent voice, was even more important. So how do we kind of maintain that and continue to elevate that in our practices?
Amber, one or two takeaways?
Wow. I think my favorite is reclaiming time to think. And I think, using that method as a gathering place, right? When it came to really just being with the team, and also inviting all stakeholders, I thought that just needs to be continued and fostered. And I think, of course, adding on what Yetta was talking about the well-being, people first before paper. And I think that's just, definitely had to just be at the core of everything that we've gotten used to doing. And, just having grace also for yourselves, right? I think a lot of times, like us as human beings, will just continue to work, but really to hone in and to thank yourself for the hard work that you've been doing and you continue to do for our communities, because we all need to ensure that, our well-being is fully running, and we're healthy. And I think that was the main thing that we ensured with our staff members and students and parents, regardless of what they were dealing with, is that their health had to come first. And everything else, we'll just have to wait.
Thank you both for that insight. And I think it's just so significant to elevate that we need to center humans in all of our work, because you can't have education without humans and without that community. So now we're going to open it up to the audience for some questions. Just as a reminder to everyone, there is a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen there. Please put your questions in there so that I can pose them to our panel. Christy, if you could join us back on camera, please. I think we have some questions for you as well. The first thing, I've seen a couple of questions come in that are related to the rules and asking for specific text or information around rules. So Christy, I'm just going to drop in the chat here a memo that we have that gives some background information about the rules. And I'll just put that in right here for anyone who wants to see those in writing. And let's see. So our first question, this is a quick yes or no question for you, Christy. Are charter schools in New York City eligible for developer grants?
So New York State has a state entity grant. And so by definition, the developer grants go to entities that are in states that don't have a state grant. The questioner might have meant not the developer, but CMO. So the answer to that question would be yes. If you're replicating and expanding and meet the definition of a charter management organization, you can apply to replicate and expand through the federal grant program. I will say that New York has a state entity grant, and hopefully we'll be able to make awards for replication and expansion because that's permitted under the state authority as well. There are differing requirements, however, and we're happy to help with any decisions related to that, especially at the federal level.
Thanks, Christy.
It wasn't a quick yes or no answer.
Yes. Well, thank you for giving the context, Christy. This is another question for you, Christy. This is coming from Melissa Kinsella. She asks, our current CSP grant for expansion ends in September 2023, and they might acquire a second charter for replication. Is there anything in the new rules that would prohibit them from applying for a second charter or hurt their chances of getting a second CSP grant?
I mean, a lot of that could be dependent on the particular project that they propose, such as if they were, I don't know about the school, but if they're proposing to offer a certain course of curriculum or like a culturally affirming school, that would be a new requirement that wouldn't have applied the last time and could potentially disadvantage them. Again, it would mean that they would get fewer points that could make them unfundable. It could put them further down the slate beyond the reach of funds. Doesn't necessarily disqualify them.
Great, thank you. Oh,
yeah. But having a previous grant does not, in and of itself, doesn't make you unqualified.
Great, thanks, Christy. This is a question for Yetta and Amber. There's a lot of talk about teacher shortages in the news these days. So I'm curious to know if you two are experiencing challenges around staffing this year, and what are you doing to attract and retain staff during these really difficult times? And maybe let's start with Yetta. I saw you come off mute there and nodding.
Yeah, it's a beast. Everyone knows with teacher shortages, because folks made life-changing decisions around the pandemic. While our schools have a good retention policy, as we grow schools, we're still struggling to get math teachers, special educators, ESL teachers. And so we are going within to grow our own and to start residency models where there are folks that are degree folks, but we're partnering with other organizations such as Relay and the local universities to get them certified. And so our teacher residency model has grown. And the great thing about it now, some of our residents are alumni that are coming back to teach. They're leaving a traditional work field to go back in and teach. So we're hoping to kind of grow our own and grow a pipeline for that.
Thanks, Yetta. What about you, Amber?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is just the first time that I think that we've ever felt we felt the void here. We're still struggling with not having any. I think we right now don't have like ELA and math teachers and also science teachers. So it has been hard. It has been hard to find individuals that want to be in education. And so I think, I mean, you know, we haven't really figured it out yet because Hawaii, the standard cost of living is extremely high. And so, you know, I think it really just comes down to working with our legislators, which is why we've been, you know, educating our students about what salaries are and how much teachers make here. And when they figure out the salary and they do like the whole cost of living, they're like, oh my gosh, is this really what's happening here? So I think that's definitely something new, other than, of course, we've just been trying to incentivize. We really are just doing our best to, of course, advertise and welcome individuals that are just looking for something new. And I think that, you know, as Dreamhouse continues to grow and grow and grow, and the fact that educators are looking for just something, you know, completely different and out of the box, it's really important, you know, for them to just come into the actual learning environment and to see and to talk story with what it's like to be a first-year Dreamhouse educator and also a founding team member, because those are totally different perspectives. And I'm very hopeful that this year in our newly staff recruitment model, you know, it would allow individuals who are applying to our school to really get what reality truly is, especially for our high school, because knowing that you have 100 students all in one class, how does one design for 100 learners? And so to also get our teachers on board and to share the narrative and their experiences, that's really what we've been doing.
Thanks, Amber and Yetta. Everyone, just a flag, I just dropped into the chat a link to the Federal Register where you can find out information about applying for CMO funding that someone just asked for. And Christy, this is a question for you. For schools that don't have a management company but are in a collaborative, can they apply without an EMO or a CMO for replication and expansion? Oh, Christy, you're on mute still.
In order to apply, you have to meet the definition of a CMO, which I actually have right in front of me. but it means a nonprofit organization that operates or manages a network of charter schools linked by centralized support, operations, and oversight. So that is broad enough that, for example, KIPP Foundation can apply on behalf of all of its regions. I'm not sure, but the really important words there are operate or manage. And so if that entity is not doing that, I don't know that they would be eligible.
Thanks, Christy. We're getting close to our time right now. So if you have any burning questions, you could drop them in the chat. We'll try to get to them. But right now, I want to give Christy a chance to do a little bit of prognosticating about our work in 2023 and how we can all continue fighting for a stronger charter school community going forward.
Thanks, Fiona. So yes, 2023, we each day get new pieces of information about the makeup of Congress and how that could potentially impact our work on behalf of charter schools and the charter schools program. Importantly, we are seeing a change in the ranking members or chairman of the Appropriations Committee that make decisions about funding for the charter schools program. And so we are very grateful to Senator Blunt and all that he's done for funding the charter schools program, but he is retiring and we don't yet know who will be taking over as the Republican ranking member, nor the Democratic chairman of the subcommittee for Labor H. Once we know who those folks are, we will certainly need your support in reaching out to them throughout the appropriations process when we come to you in our call to action to support funding. Senator Murray will be chairman of the Appropriations Committee, and we've been working closely with her staff on the appropriations side, as well as the committee, the authorizing committee side, to improve and increase their awareness and understanding of charter schools nationally, as well as in Washington State. And so we do feel like we're better positioned with the appropriations chairman. And then in the House, you know, with the Republicans taking over, we are potentially going to see fewer proposals like Chairwoman DeLauro has proposed for regulating charter schools. So what we need you all to do is continue to engage when we come out to you in the spring, not just for increasing funding for the CSP, but also flexibility within the CSP, and there may be opportunities for more funding for charter schools facilities for all charter schools. As well as if you would like to engage with your senator, in particular, this is really just a Senate issue on the Congressional Review Act and the potential repeal of the rules that vote next week, that would be something that you could do. We're not sure, that's what we're hearing. Nothing's baked when it comes to congressional activity, but it could be coming up. So sooner than later, if that's something that you want to reach out and do. But just hearing stories like yours, and that's why we do the CSP impact report, just to put faces to the money that are going out each year to support the great work that you're doing in Tennessee and in Hawaii, as well as other places. So thanks for all that you do.
Thanks, Christy. For everyone else still listening, I just dropped into the chat a link to our CSP annual impact report. So that includes more information about Yetta and Amber schools, as well as information about other schools that have been impacted by the CSP in recent years. So please feel free to take a look at that. There's a lot of great information in there and some inspiring stories. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us today. I want to say especially thank you to Yetta Lewis and Amber Leon Guerrero for taking time out of their incredibly busy schedules. I have been an educator. I know how busy you all are. We really appreciate this hour of your lives. And we encourage everyone else who's on the line right now to stay in touch. We will be sharing a recording of this webinar, and you'll get a follow-up email that will have that recording, as well as a link to the CSP impact report. And we have other resources that are available on our website. So thank you all again for joining us today, and we hope that you all have a wonderful holiday season. Thank you.